Thunder Grunt.
How you guys doing?
Us or the audience? Is this
You,
like
the people at the table.
Man, I'm
Jamie
doing
Nash
great.
and Jimmy George, and I'm Bob Rose.
Hey guys.
we're back?
We're going to talk about the movie that made shawarma sales go up
Shawarma.
for months after its release.
It kind of did for shawarma what Reese's Pieces did for E.T. did
did
for
Reese's.
Reese's. Oh, yeah, backwards. Yeah. E.T. would have never gone anywhere if it wasn't for Reese's.
Yeah.
I kind of wish, though, it like stayed. Like shawarma just became so big. They started selling it in, like vending machines and stuff. Get your Iron Man shawarma.
McShawarma.
Big shawarma.
I honestly love shawarma, though.
I do too.
It's a
Never
lot.
had it.
It's really great. I love chicken shawarma.
Where do you get it? Well, I guess this wouldn't make
Around
sense.
here?
I'm gonna give a
I'll
plug.
give a plug to Hummus Corner in Reisterstown, Maryland. They make
Okay.
a
Nice.
good chicken shawarma.
Okay, I'm going there. They a sponsor. They're sponsoring the podcast.
Sponsoring the podcast.
Just
They-
this one.
When I walk in there, they're like, you know, the guy's like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" He knows me, so yeah.
I think your name's Buddy.
He knows I love Rene Russo, so
Really?
that's a weird joke.
bizarre.
That's a weird joke. All right, we're gonna
Okay.
talk about the Avengers. What a weird clunky opening for.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's a perfect
It's
metaphor.
appropriate.
Speaking of clunky openings, the Avengers. No.
Who is this Joss Whedon guy? Let's
Yeah,
talk
who
about
is
Joss
he?
Whedon.
Who is he? He first worked, we were just talking about it, on Roseanne.
Yeah.
And
I was,
Parenthood, I think?
I was talking about how I was watching. I have a DVD of all the Roseanne Halloween episodes, and I was revisiting it last Halloween, and it was just one episode after another that was awesome. And then in the credits, Joss Whedon was in the credits for it. I was like, "Whoa! I didn't know that." So yeah,
yeah, and I think like at the same time he was doing like script doctor work for like I remember Speed was the one he's most
Oh,
proud of.
okay.
Like, he
Alien
did
Resurrection,
Yeah.
anyone?
yeah,
Alien Resurrection. What other ones do?
I think he
do?
disowns that pretty much, right? Like,
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
paid the bills.
Right.
Yeah, but so he was doing script consulting. Then he did a little movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which
Ah.
came out and he
Not
didn't like
to
so
his
much.
liking. Still,
Yeah.
now it's beloved.
Yeah.
No, it's beloved.
Yeah.
I love it.
I actually
Maybe-
really like the movie, so yeah.
Paul Rubens is in it. It can't be too bad, right?
He's the best part of that movie.
He is the best
Luke
part.
Perry, man.
Yeah, Luke Perry. Great cast.
And
Donald Sutherland.
And then from there, he got the TV show Buffy. I mean, it makes it sound like the movie gave him the
Yeah,
TV, which
right.
is the exact opposite of what
It was
happened.
him. No, the TV show is him fixing a mistake.
Fixing a
And-
mistake.
Yeah, yeah.
And he came up with this classic kind of Buffy verse.
Yeah.
Followed by, of course, Angel, and then Firefly. And all
Die-hard
those.
fan of Buffy and Angel.
I thought you were a diehard fan. I was
I'm
like,
a diehard fan
Did he write
of
that?
Die Hard. 1 through 3.
1 through 3.
And a diehard Buffy Angel fan.
Man.
Not so much Firefly, which I realize sets me in this weird other box because people are obsessed with Firefly.
For me, Firefly is fine.
It's fine. No, it's not bad.
It's fine.
I never. It's not enough
I
of it for
enjoy
me to
it.
go
It's
nuts.
good.
yeah,
How's that?
yeah.
I like Serenity.
No brown coats
that-
here.
no.
No,
not
no
brown
brown coats,
coats.
but it's definitely a quality show.
How many years after Firefly was over was Serenity? What was
I don't think it was that long.
I don't need you to look it
No,
up.
I don't- yeah, I don't.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
say
think
4.
So it's close
Yeah.
proximity.
Far-
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
it took some like fan noise,
Yeah.
and stuff to get there. So
It wasn't like a decade or anything.
Okay.
Or even as
No.
long as Star Trek, the movie after Star Trek.
I was
Yeah.
working at a video store when it came out.
Oh,
so how weird is
Wow.
that?
And
Yeah,
They were still alive.
right. No, I like rented that to people at a counter. Me
On VHS?
no,
No.
DVD.
DVD.
I think VHS were
Was
pretty much
gone.
gone by then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Joss Whedon, he's a TV
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, TV guy.
I mean, he's
No,
right.
he's
I
a-
mean, I would say most of his writing is definable as TV.
So how did he get the Avengers?
Yeah, so he was talking about on the he starts the commentary saying the number one question people ask me is why did they hire you to do this movie? And
Jimmy, you recently watched the
I
commentary.
watched the
We all
commentary.
watched the
Yeah.
movie recently, but
yeah,
you watched
and I watched the commentary,
Okay.
and he said it was just based on his relationships and the people who how do you pronounce it? Feige? Kevin Feige.
I think Feige.
Kevin Feige. He said
Feige.
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 I think
One
you
of-
pronounce it GIF.
He was saying that the powers that be understood his passion for comic books, specifically the Avengers, and it was just based on his pre-existing relationships.
I
and
guess
his
he was
knowledge.
doing his X-Men run.
The
around
X-Men
that
run
time.
was pretty big.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And
So-
it felt similar in some ways tonally to his the Avengers in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. You know, it's self-aware a little bit, but also respected the characters and the situations.
Yeah,
Like
So-
Buffy, you mean?
Like Buffy.
like Buffy.
I mean, that's what Buffy is. It's a self-aware vampire show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was just about that.
Did he mention at all? Because of course Zach Penn wrote the first draft. Zach Penn, Ready Player One.
Yeah, about that. We just talked about that. Yeah.
So did Zach Penn? Did he talk about that first draft at all? Because what I remember seeing the headlines was that he really trashed it in some ways.
he didn't talk about.
didn't
Zach
talk about
Penn
it.
very much in the commentary,
He's-
and in fact,
Well,
whenever
you're saying that Joss Whedon trashed Zach Penn's first draft.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because Zach Penn apparently, and to give Zach Penn some, credit or
Yeah.
some defense, I think Zach Penn's original draft of the script, he was working on it throughout the Marvel incarnation. So
yeah,
he
that
wasn't.
makes sense.
Yeah, he wasn't. So he actually, for example, I think I heard that Thor wasn't really in his draft because they weren't sure if Thor was going to work in the movie.
Right.
So, and it was even a draft of that Zach Penn wrote where Thor was introduced in the Avengers. Like that was going to be his introduction,
Wow.
which I could kind of see.
So Zach Penn had
Yeah.
been working on something based on the pre-existing movies building up to this, and sort of Marvel was assuming this is how the Avengers would
and
be.
I think it was a moving train.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So-
he does not discuss that at all.
When Joss Whedon showed up and they hired him, Joss Whedon took one look at the script. Josh.
Josh,
I was wondering if one of us is gonna do it.
It's funny too because I'm actually saying Josh, but I say it with an H. It's like Cool Whip or whatever.
Cool Whip.
Cool Whip.
Cool
Whip.
It's like my lisp. I'm actually saying Josh.
Josh.
I'm sorry that I feel bad.
So
Like-
now you're
like
now you're
Hoss?
making fun of me.
Hey,
making
Hoss.
fun of a disability.
You're
now.
making fun of a disability.
Jamie.
It's my Baltimorean accent. But so when he first saw the script, I'm just calling him he now. When Whedon,
Whedon.
when my
Whedon.
friend Joss
Whedon.
Whedon.
I'll pronounce the
Whedon.
H. Whedon. When he when he first saw the script, he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to make this movie," and he supposedly threw it out and
But they-
completely wrote. A
But they
different
kept
script.
the name out of.
The Avengers.
No, no.
What was it
I
originally
mean,
called?
Zach Penn's
Superhero Fun Time. Great.
Yeah.
Men and Women in Tights.
Yeah.
Super Friends.
City Fight.
So are you asking? Did Zach Penn still get credit?
Is that? Do you think he just got credit?
There
Yeah.
must have been enough elements
Yeah.
to the actual story that he did keep, like probably the bigger story
Yeah.
elements.
I could believe the open was basically kept. I mean, like that doesn't really have Joss Whedon's stamp on it as much.
We don't have any place on our list to talk about like the random writing things he talked about, but so there were some interesting things that he said. There was so much prep work to be done that they were like, you have to give us something, even though he was still working on the script. So he had to write the whole big climax, and we'll get into that later, the mechanics of it. He had to write that first so they could hand it to the effects people 2 years in advance before they had anything set in stone. So he wrote the whole end, and he didn't have anything else yet set in stone.
So he had to
before
get there.
that. Because everybody, he had like teams of people who needed to be
I've heard
building
of similar
things.
stories, like on Spider-Man 2, like the train sequence in Spider-Man 2 was already storyboarded before they even had a
fascinating.
story.
Yeah, and he so the
makes
fight.
sense.
So the Iron Man, he was really gracious in the way he described this, and I thought he was really gracious throughout the thing. But it's funny, I don't remember him mentioning Zach Penn
I
at
don't-
all.
I don't think
But-
he has any hatred towards Zach Penn. He's
but
just
he-
speaking honestly.
But he talks a
Yeah.
lot in the commentary. If you're listening to this, he does talk a lot about the writing process of this movie, a lot. the Thor and Captain America, I mean the Thor and the Iron Man fight, that was not his. They brought it to him. A bunch of storyboard and effects people had been wanting this fight in the movie since its inception. Like, we have to have
a scene
fight.
that very much feels cuttable from the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I still enjoy it.
So,
I would not want to cut.
And he said he said his job with that scene was to make it motivated. He said, my only creative contribution to this fight is how to make the fight make sense within the framework of the story. I had nothing to do. And he said he was talking about shot for shot that were other people's ideas. He's like, the first thing they gave me was there's like this undershot with their like striking each other, and it's from underneath of them, their fists together. He was like, someone actually showed that to me, and was like, we want them to fight.
I knew.
Best line in the movie, in my opinion, too. One of the best lines is him going, "Shakespeare in the Park."
Yeah,
you interrupting something? Shakespeare in the Park. That's great. That's a great line.
So one of the things with Zach Penn as well, going back to that of the story by, the only stipulation they gave Joss. The only stipulation they gave him for the Avengers script, he had to include all the Avengers. Loki had to be the villain. At the midpoint, there had to be a battle between the good guys, or in the middle, not necessarily the midpoint.
They gave him that.
Yeah, they said he had to have that. He was required to have that, and there had to be a big epic showdown with the bad guys in the end. So that might have been enough similarities to Zach Penn's script, who probably had the same marching orders. And then if he had scenes like you mentioned as well, that would probably be enough to get him some kind of credit on the screen.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then,
don't you feel like the opening, the writing, and even almost execution feels like an X-Men movie more than it does?
That's a good point.
Than it does an Avengers. And Zach Penn wrote a couple X-Men movies, right?
Yeah.
Just that.
You're right.
It doesn't feel like a Whedon open. It's a little bit clunkier than I think Whedon would make it, and it just feels like that could be left over.
Yeah.
Could be.
It doesn't even feel like it's part of the movie, because like the title's separated from the actual movie. The title, the Avengers title itself. Yeah.
So
the Firefly has like this weird kind of clunky opening that's action oriented. Like
it does.
That.
You're right. It does. I could be wrong completely. I'm just guessing here.
Slightly similar. Though I don't know. Well, who knows?
So
we'll have to ask Zach Penn.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't. We don't have him on.
Here he is.
Yeah. Zach, what do you think?
Hey guys.
I mean, so this being the first big team up movie, the approach, as you were talking about, as you both were talking about, had to be really almost all. It's weird because we were saying it doesn't feel like a movie, and it being the first giant team up movie, maybe this is the first time this was ever attempted in history.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a traditional movie.
Yeah. I didn't
at
appreciate. So, amidst the first time I saw it in 2012, amidst all the hoopla, that sort of subtracted for me away from what its responsibility was, which is like it's shouldering the weight of so much shit.
At that time, 4 franchises,
all those franchises, all of the fan expectation for the history of comic books, and no one's ever done anything like this. And I think for what it has to shoulder, it succeeds so well.
Literally the best film going experience I think I might have ever had.
Wow.
It was
there's no
cool.
People were falling out of their chairs in the theater.
But when I watched it, I was kind of like, this was good. But, removed from all the hoopla and like knowing where it's gone since then, and how like if this didn't work, like think of how many more movies wouldn't. Yeah,
it's Iron Man and this, and then going forward, you could point to a few more. But
Guardians
those 2 movies had to work for this all to work.
There'd be no Guardians.
Yeah, there'd be none of that.
Yeah,
I remember when the movie came out. I don't know that I was bored of superhero movies or something, but the one thing I hadn't seen from any of these superhero movies was teaming them all up together in a big way. So it kind of gets lost. We might forget about that now, many years later, when we've seen a lot of team-up movies.
Yeah.
But that was the first where they were like, can they pull this off? Can they put all these characters together and still make it work? Will it make sense? And it did.
It did.
Do you think that even considering all the things we just talked about with Zach Penn, Whedon's good with an ensemble?
Yeah.
And that comes from television.
Yeah.
I mean, he's good at writing lots of dialogue with lots of characters in one room staring at each other and quipping.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Buffy and Angel are. Yeah.
they're even as much as they're called Buffy and Angel, they're group shows for sure. It's a team. They're the Scoobies or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
it's an ensemble show. It works.
He found an incredible way to give everybody something to do. He was saying in the commentary that the first draft was 190 pages, and Hawkeye was just kind of standing around in every single scene. So once he figured out that he needed to have Hawkeye be like sort of a villain, that reshaped the whole story, and
Which
then it ended
Jeremy
up...
Renner hated, by the way.
Yeah, no, and he even said he felt bad making
Yeah.
it. He was like, this is his time to shine, and I was like, you're not going to be an Avenger actually until the end of the movie.
I heard there were also earlier drafts, and this speaks to this, where the Wasp was in it.
Yeah, he said there were more.
There was even Ultron.
There were more. So there were more heroes
Really?
and villains. It was way. He described it as being way more bloated. And then the two breaks in the story that streamlined it were Hawkeye and Coulson. Once he figured out the Coulson angle, now
motivation.
He was ordered to kill Coulson.
We call him Phil.
Phil.
Yeah.
He said that he was from
Why are you calling him Phil?
from the time he was hired on, that he was like ordered to kill Coulson. So he was heavily against that. But once he figured out how to make that work and everybody to be motivated around the loss of his character, that made it go from
specifically, I think not just that, make Nick Fury exploit it, which gave
Yes.
Nick Fury has a pretty good through line in this movie, where I think you understand him for the first time more than ever.
Yeah.
Like, you know
The
what I mean?
lengths.
I really do think like Jackson's arc works in
it's
this movie.
so good. And that was another interesting thing that he said that you wouldn't like know. And I didn't. Jamie had the script, but I didn't read the script. But all of the Nick Fury and the council scenes, he took them out of the script, so they just shot them. And he decided where to place it. It didn't matter to him. He just found pacing wise where it fit into the story. He was like, I'm just gonna shoot all of these, and then I'll figure out where they work later. But they weren't like,
right.
The script
that's a weird thing.
Yeah, the script that's online, and people can go check it out. Just Google it, you'll find it. It's all over the place. It struck me. I did a quick read through, and it seemed like more of a production script, like something they do after the fact, probably for Oscar submissions and stuff like that. It didn't necessarily feel like the rough. Yeah,
it felt thrown together.
Yeah, like you honestly, like for the WGA, I get these books. They send me these books of the printed screenplay, and they do tend to be some cleaned up version. Like the one I was most interested in always was like The Force Awakens, because I was hoping there'd be some secrets they left behind, and there wasn't. It was like so cleaned up, and you could just tell.
It's the exact screen movie.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
But yeah, he discussed how there were a lot more characters, and it was way more even more bloated than it ended up being. Yeah.
We think that was just from the actual task being so huge.
Yeah.
Went overboard with it.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
I mean, he's a fan, so
it would be an easy movie to make that big. And he did a great job of giving each of the heroes their own arcs and stories and motivations. And whenever you have that, times 5, times 6, times 7, it just it can be huge.
Did you guys ever? I think my one complaint with the deleted scenes in this movie is they cut out Cap in one scene dealing with him waking up.
Oh yeah,
it's online. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. It's a great scene for character building.
So he discussed that too.
Did he discuss it?
He
Okay.
discussed it. He said originally he shot 3 or 4 scenes of Captain America dealing with the man out of time aspect, because it hadn't really been dealt with post the events the last time we saw him, and all he was trying to do with those scenes was capture his sense of isolation and loneliness. And he said he felt that the punching bag scene where you just see all the punching bags on the floor captured isolation and loneliness on its own and didn't need all that extra shit.
It probably needed runtime too, right?
Yeah. And to cut it from 2 hours and 30 minutes to 2 hours and 28.
I still really like those deleted scenes, though. I mean, I get what you're saying. I get what he's saying, but it really just because Cap just comes in. It's just it's so brief,
Should have been
fine.
A post-credit sequence on Thor or something.
Now here's Cap learning how television works. Yeah.
But it was just, it was interesting.
Yeah.
How's this remote? What's this? A remote control?
Just an old man getting lost in a like department store.
Oh man, Captain America's my favorite character.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
We're not
Okay.
talking about the
But
portrayals though, Jimmy.
yeah,
Well,
Why does Marvel work so well though? Let's talk about that. Why does because like this is the linchpin that I think enabled it to get to 10 years, enabled it to be Infinity War.
I think the simplest answer is the characters.
Yeah.
I think that's the simplest answer. I was thinking about this coming here because, again, characters is so simple. But Marvel has this thing where it's specific characters with these abilities, and they're almost like curses in most. Whereas in DC, a lot of the characters grow up with it. You know, Batman grew up with the problem.
Right.
Superman grew up as Superman. Wonder Woman grew up as. But in these cases, Iron Man became Iron Man. He was already rich. You know, he had these problems. Captain America was a hero, a war guy, and then he became Captain America.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's something about that
Even Thor was a prince, but he didn't become Thor until
He didn't
in
become
the first
Thor.
movie. He becomes Thor kind of in that movie.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. So
I mean,
I think that might have something to do with the way their characters are because they're less pure almost or something.
Yeah.
And they're really
They're
conflicted.
flawed.
They're
all
these flawed
flawed.
people who are handed these
Yeah.
powers and responsibilities.
They're almost
Spider-Man-esque.
humanized,
here's the thing.
even though a lot of them are not.
Here's how
They're
good Marvel
superhuman.
is. Like, I love these movies, and I love the MCU, and I love this movie, you know, and I love all the characters. But I'm a DC guy.
How about
I
that?
prefer those heroes, and I prefer the purity and the fact that you're not supposed to relate to them, their ideas. I prefer that.
Yeah.
That interests me more because I don't really, in the case of superheroes and such, and the writing and everything, I prefer them not to have my problems.
So you don't want them to be people.
I was never a
Yeah.
Spider-Man fan.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I want them to be dealing with things bigger than me, and I want them to be things I look up to and to aspire to be, not something I could be like, well, if I had this power, I'd also have
This
to
is how I would have to deal with
I'd
it.
also have to eat my fiber, you know, like I don't want that. So these movies are so good that they brought me over to Marvel in a way I don't think that I ever was. Even though I loved the Hawk growing up, and I'm a big fan of Thor and everything, but like they brought me to Marvel. They actually, like, I think they have the ability to make people who didn't appreciate Marvel appreciate them again.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing I can say because it did it better than the comics did for me.
That's my question because
Yeah.
I'm not a comic guy.
This movie especially is my point
So
on that. Yeah.
the DC movies, even the DC movies that came before the DC universe that is today, which we're not going to talk about.
We're not going to talk about that. Yeah.
Every single movie, even Thor, because a lot of it takes place on Earth, is grounded in our reality.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like Gotham City. It doesn't feel like it feels like it's here and now. And I feel like the grounded in reality, every single one of these characters and stories that we've seen so far feels like it could. It doesn't feel like it could happen, but it does.
The MCU feels very present.
Yes, that's the
It's
word
not
I'm looking for.
otherworldly. It's not otherworldly at all.
It's really
Yeah.
tangible.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if there was a guy who was rich and made a flying suit, I could see that happening. You know,
Which
what I
is
mean?
weird because like this is we're not going to talk about the other one, but this is like the more cartoonish, fun, colorful universe. Whereas if you looked at the other one, it is like the more gritty.
Yeah,
dark
the
one.
irony in that.
It's really weird how
There's
we
a lot
got
of weird
here.
paradoxes.
It's
Yeah.
really a
going
lot
on
of
there.
weird stuff, but
Yeah,
this
that's
one,
a good point.
this feels more now and here, and
Yeah.
it's just a present with us.
Well, 9/11 I think is inherent in the Avengers. and
I think
things
so
like that.
too.
It's really inherent in the DC universe.
And Man of Steel is like
Man of
9/11 in
Steel.
the movie.
It's
Please, let's not talk about DC.
We're not
movies
going to.
ever. Yeah, I
Well,
can't.
I mean, you're asking. It's relevant.
It's a relevant thing. Yeah,
It's relevant.
Bob's always angry.
It's your secret.
That's a secret.
I love DC, man. I always have. I'm not saying that.
And I think with Marvel, that's where a lot of the humor comes from, is these characters and stuff. The fact that they're modern people. It's almost like they're giving us 5 hand solos. We
Yeah.
really don't have a Luke Skywalker in the
They're
group.
all cool in
Captain
their
America
own
a little
right
bit.
somehow. They
Yeah.
like this movie accomplishes that really well. I think
Yeah.
it makes almost all of them, maybe with the exception of Banner, but properly with Banner.
Properly.
Like he's not strutting, but
Yeah.
all the rest of them kind of strut in this movie in the
Yeah.
proper way.
Even he does a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
I guess he
like
does.
think
In
about
the
his
end.
scene with
Well, the big
Black
scene,
Widow when he,
yeah.
when he jumps at the table just to kind of get her.
Yeah.
You know, like,
And he has like maybe the best moment in the entire movie.
Yeah,
does.
definitely.
Right. So
Couple of them.
Yeah, everyone looks cool at some point. Even like Hawkeye has a moment. You know what I mean?
He's got a couple though.
Yeah, if the script succeeds anywhere, it's that.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah, and I mean, even Coulson has his own way. You know, he's kind of snarky and quippy and cool.
Yeah.
too.
It's kind of his movie up to that point, right?
Yeah.
Until he dies.
Yeah, the only guy maybe the scientist. He's not cool. that guy's,
The Galaga guy.
Yeah.
he's not really cool.
He's not that cool. But it's I mean, like the conceit is, I think it works completely because we've also lived with these characters too. No one had ever done that before.
Oh.
You know,
It's really
you never
impressive.
lived with. I mean, Iron Man. We lived with 2 movies before we even got here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everything's established. Think of all the time too in the writing you don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
No one in that theater needs to know a damn thing about Iron Man
Yeah.
walking in.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah, it's
important,
Really
right?
important. Yeah.
Basically, if this movie didn't happen, we would have never had the Tom Cruise Mummy movie.
Yeah.
Think about that, people.
No, it's really true. I liked one aspect of that movie.
I didn't see
One.
I
Yeah,
can't wait to hear it.
Oh, you didn't want me to tell you what it was? It was the Dr. Jekyll portrayal. And Mr. Hyde. It was very accurate to the book. And the rest of the movie was the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Opening scene in MacGuffins.
Yeah.
What's a MacGuffin and the history of that?
Yeah, I just thought there's definitely this thing in the Marvel universe and superhero movies in general that they have almost pure MacGuffins, don't they?
Well, it's one big MacGuffin that has a lot of small MacGuffins attached to it.
Yeah.
The Infinity Gauntlet is
Yeah,
the MacGuffin
it
of this
is.
entire thing.
They're building to
Yeah,
that.
they've
We're
always
about
been-
to see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Infinity Stones, Tesseracts,
Yeah.
Infinity Gauntlets, these are MacGuffins. The MacGuffins are simply this thing that Hitchcock came up with. And I don't even know how useful they are, so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. But it's basically just the thing people are after.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock's purist version, I think he was almost making fun of them, or maybe even making fun of the audience or something, by saying the more interchangeable they are, the more MacGuffin-y they are. you
Oh,
know?
really?
Yeah, that was his thing. So the perfect example,
yeah.
of MacGuffin would be like the Pulp Fiction briefcase.
briefcase.
You know,
Right,
because
right,
it could
yeah.
be anything.
Yeah.
It could be a bag of money. It could be a nuclear codes or
Yeah.
a bomb or whatever.
I point to Indiana Jones movies. They're MacGuffin heavy
Yeah.
movies. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the
Holy Grail,
the Holy
Shikara
Holy Grail has
Stones.
been the MacGuffin in many movies,
Right.
Yeah.
including like Monty Python movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are typical MacGuffins as well. And if basically, I think the rule that Hitchcock had was that if they were interchangeable and he really didn't affect the plot by what they were, that was a true MacGuffin. Like that's the
Yeah.
point I think he was getting at. They've sort of it's sort of evolved to this thing where even the One Ring is a MacGuffin, but
Yeah.
the One Ring kind of does affect the plot. You know,
Yeah.
it has certain powers that
Right,
it's
right.
not interchangeable. You
Yeah.
couldn't just flip it out for a
I think the term
box of gold.
has kind of extended beyond that, though.
I think you're right.
I think it doesn't matter that it's interchangeable. It just is the thing
Yeah.
that they're chasing.
I've even heard people just basically extend it to the character goal. You
Yeah?
know, like it could be a psychological
Goal.
MacGuffin or a person.
Oh,
or
a psychological MacGuffin.
you know,
That's-
but
I've never
I-
heard that.
I
I,
think
like
you're
they
that.
want to be happy.
I,
That's the MacGuffin is happiness.
I think it's almost getting to the point where what's the purpose of using the term MacGuffin? You
Yeah.
can just use a goal. But I think the reason, MacGuffins were so popular, it was like, let's throw this thing in that one side wants and the bad guys want. So then there's conflict.
It's something to fight over.
It's something to fight
yeah,
over.
and it's easy. It's
Yeah.
simple. We
Well,
can understand
okay,
it. It's
so
visual. It's
with
visual.
That, with what you said in mind, the MacGuffin in this specific movie, would that be the Tesseract? Because
yeah, definitely. It does
it's not
something.
interchangeable. It actually does something specific.
Yeah, but what are the heroes gonna do with it once they get it? They're just gonna hide it.
Give it back to Thor.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's where it gets a little questionable.
But I think
where it
I
has
think
a
it's a
I'm
line.
not
MacGuffin.
questioning you.
I would
I'm
call-
not saying
I
you're wrong.
understand.
I would
I'm
call
saying
it-
it doesn't really fit in with that traditional definition.
I'm not sure what Hitchcock would say about it. Is basically he'd say, "Whoa, I can't do a Hitchcock."
This movie ruled.
Yeah,
I'm not going to add my third Hitchcock impersonation.
I don't even know how Hitchcock sounded at that point.
because really the modern day definition is the thing that they want that drives the story.
I think this is definitely a case of a MacGuffin. Yeah. Yeah.
The Tesseract.
Oh yeah, Tesseract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then every other object since then that people are going for in the various movies are MacGuffins too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even know how useful it is for writers to think about MacGuffins, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think it's just one more piece of vocabulary that they should be aware of.
You should
and
definitely
understand.
be
I
aware
often
of it.
do.
Yeah.
If I'm like coming up with something, I'm like, what is the MacGuffin? And then
Sure.
then I try to subvert what a MacGuffin is.
Yeah.
If I can.
The anti-MacGuffin.
Anti-MacGuffin.
But by the way, Hitchcock didn't invent that term. It was a screenwriter that he worked with. So just
Jim
wanted
MacGuffin.
well, you know what's funny? His name is Angus MacPhail. So
really?
it does have a Mac in there.
Yeah.
I kind of want to write a movie that's like where the MacGuffin's a McMuffin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's perfect.
I'm sure it's been done.
Yeah, it has to have been done.
Or just a McDonald's commercial.
Right. Anyway, about the Avengers.
Be like the McDonald's
Yeah.
Avengers.
Right. Why not?
A
you
super
know?
team trying to get.
McGriddle has to
Dude.
play in.
I don't want to be friends with anyone who doesn't want a Grimace movie.
Oh, I would love
Oh,
it.
Don't you want to see a Grimace be born? Where'd he come from?
I mean, really, that was the first cinematic universe, though.
Yeah.
You know,
The McDonald's,
Hamburglar,
yeah.
Ronald McDonald.
The Fry Guys,
It's,
Birdie.
it's relevant,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah, why does Birdie have to wear a helmet to fly? Okay.
Getting
So
into the
Tesseract, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
Tesseract
we're going
is-
to talk about the dialogue. Yeah.
I mean, it's a quippy movie.
yeah.
You know, it establishes jokes that are actually one of my favorite thing in Thor Ragnarok. I don't know if you guys seen Thor Ragnarok. Was that it brought back jokes from like 7-8 years ago. You know, like the fact that there was that Point Break joke about
Yeah,
Thor
Point
and
Break.
the audience
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's how much this movie held.
Yeah.
That people could actually in the theater like laugh out loud at a
Yeah.
joke that I'm not sure people originally even understood.
Right.
Like,
The reference.
the reference to it, right? So
Yeah.
it's
I mean, with Whedon's known for his dialogue.
Yeah.
He's definitely quippy. I would say he writes dialogue like we wish we would speak on our best day.
Yes.
Like everybody's super clever and things like that. It's
a lot
almost
of asides.
a lot of asides, a lot of self-awareness.
Do you think it's too cutesy at times?
I love it. I love it.
Okay, it's not an insult. I'm
Right.
just saying.
No, I feel insulted.
No, not to him. I know I was insulting you. I'm saying, do you ever feel like it's cutesy?
Don't tell me how to feel.
Feel like it's cutesy, Jamie. No, you know what I'm saying though. Like sometimes it can come off cutesy with
Well,
the like me, like
having everyone talk
being
that
all
way.
smart. and
Yeah,
sometimes,
like kind of
so-
like a Juno.
right. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, do we need 5 Deadpools?
Yeah.
Should there be a straight man?
Yeah.
I
should
think
there
Captain
be-
America serves,
He
For the
does.
most
and
part.
even he gets a quip. You know,
Yeah.
I understood that
I
reference.
understood that
Right. Yeah.
The-
Yeah.
I think the biggest danger is all the characters can end up sounding the same.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the writer taking control. For some reason with the Avengers, I feel less like that. And
Yeah.
I think it is because these characters are so established. So he's filtering his Whedonness
Through them.
through
Through
the
that.
characters.
He also knows
Yeah.
them from the source material too.
He
That's
does.
very
Yeah,
obvious.
he knows it
too.
very well.
Because I think with dialogue, as long as the characters have motivation in the dialogue and they're not just talking about something random, then you can kind of filter that motivation. Because really, dialogue is just taking action to achieve a goal,
Yeah.
usually. And then you just filter it through all their psychological hang-ups
Right,
and,
Yeah.
and quirks and weirdness.
Yeah.
And I think he does a really good job in this movie. of
I
that.
think so. So some of the things I noted were he verbalizes power struggles really well. You know, every single one of those scenes feels like a power struggle between and multiple characters struggling
Right.
for power within each other. you
Even
know?
in a lesser way with like the Pepper Potts Iron Man
Oh,
scene.
totally,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
There's the power struggle there.
It's just a subtle, it's like romantic talk, but there's a subtle struggle, like 12% the credit.
Yeah.
But it's not like
You know.
toxic. It's not like
No, not at all.
bringing it down. It builds it up. Almost.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're fighting, but it works for the
Yeah.
scene.
Well,
Yeah.
so even her and so one thing that we didn't write down on the list, but I wanted to talk about that I think this movie succeeds at better than any other aspect of the storytelling is giving every single character a moral and ideological like through line. Every single character, what makes them stand out is not just their powers; it's like what they believe in. You know, Tony Stark believes something very different than Captain America, and their clash is about like what their morals, you know. And when you get all those people in the room, you know, Hulk wants to avoid conflict, you know, in the beginning, and he grows. Every single one of them learns from each other's like morals, and I feel like they in the beginning, all the conflict is they're like, what you believe in is wrong. You know, and by the end, they're like, "Oh, I understand why you believe in this, and I respect that." They learn to work together based on their morals, and I feel like that is like definitely informs the dialogue big time. You know, and I think a lot there's a lot to learn
even
from
with
that.
Nick Fury, like even down to Nick Fury,
the lengths he's gonna go,
to,
like he just wants to win the war. You know, he'll do anything to win the war. You know, it doesn't matter.
Also, this is a weird. I guess this goes with your point, but this is a weird thing I noticed this morning while watching it. But a lot of this movie, it's the characters are written so well that it conveys to me that a lot of the movie is Thor is like sad. It's really like it doesn't. It's not his normal thing for all. He feels
guilty.
Yeah, like the guilt. I was like, it actually really sticks and well. Like how he views this all as his fault.
Yeah, from the previous movies.
From the previous movies, Loki's his responsibility.
Yeah.
He feels kind of shame, but there's like a moment where like he gets blamed for everything, and instantly he's on the defensive. And I was like, it's actually pretty meaty, like all that with him and Nick Fury, and them blaming him. And I was like, I never really thought of it as a Thor movie, but it kind of is on the backbone of it. Yeah,
because of his story with Loki.
With Loki and everything. It's kind of like the end of that story in a way. But it's well written.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a small, tiny little thing part of the movie. And I was like, man, he's really sad in this movie. He's like, really sad. Okay. Yeah.
But, yeah, because I read a lot of scripts. I don't know with your students if you read a lot of this. And there's conflict, right? So they get they get the conflict right, but the conflict isn't based on like the characters' like morals and viewpoints, you know?
Well, yeah. So you're saying the conflict itself isn't based, so they're not finding the right conflict, or are you saying how they deal with the conflict?
How they portray the conflict often in the scripts I read isn't based on the character's belief system.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So if you look at like the really bad on the nose dialogue, like the one I always like to show is the Phantom Menace. You know, it has totally on the nose dialogue. So these characters are not really even characters. They're just these kind of props where they're saying lines
to get to the next scene.
And they're having a love story, and it's just like, I love you. I love you too.
Your skin is hot. I'd like to mate with you.
And instead of this scene where, again, it's filtered through these characters. And a lot of times it's just like with, I mentioned Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. The way they talk to each other, they're never saying "I love you" or anything. They're just.
But you feel them saying "I love you" without saying it. It's well done.
Yeah. You feel there's even when Coulson comes in to interrupt and stuff, then there's like a jealousy aspect to it.
Yeah, he's like, Phil. Since when is he called Phil?
And it's amazing too. Like Coulson's so well written in this movie that only like the small bit of fandom of Cap just defines him completely right. You know what I mean? Like he gave him a heart with this tiny little storyline.
It works
before you kill him. Like it made that death so much more heartbreaking because he was a fan of Captain America.
Right.
Because it's really well done.
He's almost like the audience in some ways.
Yeah.
That's what he's almost like. He's almost like the fan in the audience, like loving the characters. Now I don't know that the fan in the audience really feels like these characters shouldn't be acting this way. Like that's how he's the one that sees the optimistic side.
Yeah, he believes in them more than they believe in themselves. Right. Yeah,
he's the believer.
Coulson.
Coulson. Yeah, Coulson.
Yeah. Right. He knew this was gonna work the whole time. You know.
To some degree, I think Fury also plays that part.
Yeah,
right?
He does.
I mean, but he's also fighting with others that don't. Actually his belief is being questioned by the council. Yeah. Whereas Coulson doesn't have anyone throwing it in his face. He's just pure fanboy, I guess.
Fury is kind of the cynic as opposed to the optimistic Coulson too. He has a side of him that he's going to keep some weapons just in case too. Like whereas I think Coulson's the type that wouldn't make some weapons to fight Hulk because he believes in the best of Hulk.
I agree.
Think with also to give credit to this movie. Looking forward to where it went, it also made Fury a much more interesting character because from this moment on, it's like we know he's there to save the world completely, but we also don't trust him. He's always got something up his sleeve no matter what, and it plays well in the future.
And he mentioned in the commentary that he was sure they were going to cut all of the gray area of Fury.
That would have been such a shame.
Yeah, no, he was sure that they were just going to keep him like...
Yeah, don't cut Sam Jackson. What are you, insane?
He gets paid a lot of money.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, you want Sam Jackson on screen.
He was like talking about every time there was a scene where Samuel Jackson was, Nick Fury was, when he's holding the bloody cards, he said, I thought there was no way that this was going to be allowed to stay in the movie. So I'm glad that they let him do that.
What do you mean, to reveal that, like, he...
Yeah, that
he did it as a ruse?
Yeah.
But that gives that whole thing character.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all character there.
He was convinced they were going to cut it, so I'm glad they kept it. Thank you, Marvel.
But isn't that why we're here right now talking about it? Why Infinity War's coming out in a few weeks?
Yeah,
like because they let that stuff happen. Yeah. They let the filmmakers do what they do, right?
Yeah. Oh, one other dialogue thing I wanted to mention. This was an example of this is something that got cut. He does a lot of verbal setups that are then visual payoffs. So an example is they're having their quips back and forth, and Tony Stark says, "You can smell crazy" on Loki to Bruce Banner. And that was originally a setup for a payoff later for a scene that got cut where Loki was making multiple versions of himself in front of Hulk, and then Hulk sniffed, and that's how he beat up Loki. Yeah. So, but he does a lot of stuff like that. Just he uses dialogue as setup payoff a lot.
Also, in that scene, that exact moment when he's like insulting Loki, and then Thor's like, "You watch what you say. He's my brother." And he killed 80 people so far, and he's like, "He's adopted."
He's adopted.
Yeah, just a great moment. Yeah, great dialogue.
Yeah. But so there, I do think there's a lot to be learned. How to do dialogue well through this movie for sure.
Yeah. I sometimes before I go into a script, I do like these heavy-handed, quippy, clever dialogue writers. The I don't know, Aaron Sorkins, the Diablo Codys. Tarantino to an extent. Who else? Amy Sherman Palladino from Gilmore Girls. I actually love watching things they write, and I get that in my head when I'm writing because it just inspires me. Like, look how clever! I'll never be that clever, but I should think about being at least a little more
in
clever.
real life.
It gets you into the rhythm.
Yeah,
it gets me in the rhythm of something. And,
Cheers.
And
watching when I think.
I thought you were just saying cheers.
Cheers. Cheers
the show.
Okay, yeah.
The dialogue is so well done consistently.
To you.
Cheers to you, Jamie.
I thought you were actually saying cheers too.
Cheers.
So,
I held up a glass.
That's a piece of dialogue I'm going to add into my own personal repertoire. I'm just going to start saying cheers more
in the middle of conversation.
Cheers.
You mean the show? Yeah. The next thing we're going to talk about, which is something I'm excited to talk about because me and Jimmy have argued it several times in the past, which is stakes and superheroes. We've argued it a lot.
In the
I feel like I've won you over a little bit with because you were arguing like I was 2 years ago.
In life, not about this script.
Not about this script, but you were arguing. Well, that's what we should talk about. Why does this work? But people have been reading these stories for 70, 80 to 100 years, and they always read those comics knowing that so and so's not probably gonna die. Yeah, not gonna die. And when they do die, it's announced. It's like this is the issue where Cap dies.
You want to buy this issue?
No one saw this movie and assumed anyone on that team was going to not make it. Like, but how does this script make the stakes real? I was going to say Coulson, but
Coulson.
I was going to say Coulson,
but kill off of beloved kind of character.
Yeah, beloved character.
We've grown.
Is that enough though? Like, do you feel like...
I think it's enough. Yeah.
I think too. It's one of those weird things where, as long as we worry about the characters and whether they'll succeed in our own kind of part brain sort of way, I think that's the key.
I think that's where the nuclear bomb comes in.
It does.
The nuclear bomb, I think will
definitely kill at least 3 of them, right?
Yeah, because part of the stakes isn't death for them; it's failure.
It's failure.
And that was exactly what I was just about to say. Is they have goals,
right?
And they're based on their morals and ideologies, and if they fail, that's enough. I feel like.
I feel like Jamie just said the better answer that I should have said to you like 2 years ago. Because I was trying to argue with him why superhero movies still matter, even if we know they're not going to die.
I'm on your.
I know you're now.
Side
You're
now.
on my team, but I remember
then
we had
maybe
that,
I wasn't.
well, you were not then.
Yeah.
We had a big argument about it.
Yeah. You know, we're so angry with each other.
No,
all
we
the
weren't
time.
actually mad. We were never mad. I'm not saying
We had
that.
a discussion.
Right? Yeah.
I found in myself, I tended to gravitate over the years towards stories that there was a visible price that was paid for the victory. I don't know what there is.
That works well.
Yeah, and I don't know in superhero movies. So even like Thor's guilt would be the example of a physical price. I need a physical price to be paid.
Okay.
To really make it feel earned that they won.
Okay.
Whether that's a death of a relative, whether it's a sacrifice of a relationship, something, whatever, or just a personal sacrifice. I personally gravitate toward those stories. They feel more real to me. And when it doesn't have that, it feels like a little bit like we're missing something.
Well, do you feel like, I mean, the whole end is based around Tony Stark sacrificing himself. The fact that he lives, we know he's going to live.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of it rounds out his character that we know that he would have done it.
Yeah, that he
would have totally died for New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? It doesn't water it down that he actually lives, does it?
No, I don't think so.
In this case, in this tone, it's fine. Yeah.
Do you think
that
that
he need to die?
Do you think that the success of the team itself and the importance of that team is stakes itself? Meaning like
this is their first outing.
The first outing. So if this doesn't work, if they can't get these people to work together, like what does this mean for the rest of the world?
Sort of metaphoric to the whole franchise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a meta. Do you think? I think those are stakes in this story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go with what Jamie said too. I think there's a lot of stakes. Right there, it's really meta. There's a lot of stakes too. Joss Whedon's really good with this in this movie, with making the Hulk really part of the stakes. Like, because everyone's kind of number one. It's like there's a horror movie part with him pretty much hunting Scarlet. The Black Widow, sorry, and
he called him a werewolf in the commentary.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But to some degree, like it's scary. It made the whole end scene. It's like what the fact that they made the Hawk part of the team is such a victory, and it was like scary. Like, is that gonna work? The whole time the whole rest of the movie, you're like, is he a good guy?
Yeah,
which is the Hawk's whole deal. But I think this movie juggled it really well.
Really well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there were two Hawks. That's what it was. There was two Hawks. Yeah.
No,
there's been criticism too of why he's good at the end, but I just assume is when he turns himself, he can control it to some degree.
Additionally, with stakes, 2 points. One, the new movie. It sounds like we'll get some deaths, like the new Avengers.
Well, we got actors that don't want to do this anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Contracts are running out.
Yeah.
So they're going to be able to squish some people.
Yeah. Which will be weird because
really
we haven't seen that yet
in
these movies. So
different conversation, but I don't know if I'd want to see other people step in anymore.
Neither, just let it go.
I think letting it go is like the healthiest thing, and find new ones because this movie especially cements the casting. Yeah. Like, we had all their individuals, but once this happened, I was like, I don't want to see anyone else as these characters anymore.
It's enough.
They're them. They did it.
I think Black Panther, Guardians have shown us the world is now accepting of these new characters.
And a little bit weirder. Outside of it,
It wouldn't shock me if we got to a point where they just created a character that wasn't even in the comic books. That's probably the next cliff.
Original.
You think? Yeah.
An MCU original.
They have so much to dig from, though. I don't think they'll do that. And they do have some weird stuff to dig from.
Right.
So,
yeah. It would seem bizarre, but it wouldn't shock me. It's almost like the next huge cliff.
You got Guardians. The fact that they made money off Thor movies, like, I never thought that would even happen in my lifetime.
Yeah. A lot of money.
Right? Like, it doesn't make any sense that worked. So now they're willing to do anything, man.
The other thing to mention, stakes in superheroes, is the bigger stakes, the stakes of the world ending.
Yeah.
Instead of shawarma, of course.
Shawarma.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of a thing in all these movies. It's there, with the exception of them when we got to Spider-Man, for example, and the lower stakes happened,
which I really enjoyed.
I did too.
Yeah, me too. And because I think this is a few years. This is a few years
too. I really enjoy the low stakes.
Yeah. I think we're sort of getting, I wouldn't say bored with the world's going to come to the end.
I hope so.
But in Ant-Man, though, I felt like that villain in Ant-Man, while he maybe not be the best villain, I felt like he would kill anyone at any moment. Mm-hmm. So in the weirdly low-stakes movie, as opposed to this, I felt like anyone could die. He would, like, you know what I mean? Like, he seemed like a mass murderer.
Agreed.
Well, I think your point is taken. There still has to be huge stakes. It still has to feel like the end of the world to somebody.
Yeah.
Whether or not it really is the end of the world, or it's a personal end of the world.
Personal end of the world. Yeah, make it personal. Yeah.
But yeah, all these movies, end of the world. But these movies warrant it. I mean, I couldn't imagine an Avengers movie and it's about a bank robbery.
No.
You know, it just doesn't. It doesn't work.
No, if Avengers is in the title, it should be the whole world.
About the end of the world.
And that's fine. I like, you have to give this some slack. Sure, the Chitauri are basically just nameless soldiers to beat up.
Right.
And we could sit here and criticize that, but I'm like, that's kind of the right choice
it
for
works.
the first Avengers movie. They needed a nameless army of floating snake eels and weird aliens. It didn't matter, you know?
Yeah, my memory of reading Avengers comics as kids was kind of that. Like, I don't remember them for the villain's plan or the great villain plan. It was just kind of them teaming up against something and dealing with it in an episodic way. Maybe the Ultimates. I don't remember which this seems to be based off the Ultimates comic books a lot. If you've read those. They probably
Nick Fury especially. I mean,
they probably started to narrow the focus of the villain's plan a little bit and really bring a villain front and center. I'm sure I shouldn't say that. I'm speaking for all of comics. There are many stories that did that in the Avengers.
I was a huge fan of the Ultimate comics. They really shook it up well. They didn't change things that were lame. They made it like cooler. I don't know if you know what we're talking about, Jimmy.
I don't, but that's okay.
It was just like a reboot of the Marvel Universe, but still while the regular continuity was going.
They kept the other storyline
So, like,
going?
Nick Fury just was Sam Jackson in that comic. So that's, like, a metacasting, is that they just drew him as Sam Jackson.
Yeah. So, strangely, if you go back to them now, they'll just feel like, oh, it's obvious. Yeah. Because now you've seen all the movies, and you'll be like, oh, this is obviously the source material.
They take a lot of stuff from that. I think that was the first time I'd ever seen someone push Hawk off, like, a helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And then they did that in the first Hawk movie, and now I feel like he just gets pushed off of things all the time to get him to turn into the Hawk.
That's the new trigger.
Yeah.
Fire him out of a cannon or something.
Well, you know what? As a lifelong Hawk fan, I actually, when I first saw this, I almost teared up when he talks about killing himself.
Aw. Yeah.
But, I mean, it was effective. Like, that's something I wanted to hear my whole life. You know, what would have happened if Bruce... Well, no, I thought that scene is really well done, and it's in this giant... goofy, colorful movie, and I was like, man, they gave him like everything he needed.
If Edward Norton had said that, though, you would have laughed.
I was fine with Edward Norton if he wasn't such a jerk. He would have done fine in all these movies. I don't think
I think so too.
Yeah, he's
if he would have been allowed to rewrite them.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
We would have been talking about a different script right now.
I love both of them. Ruffalo's better, but Norton's fine.
I really like Edward Norton, Columbia resident. I
like Incredible Hulk. I like the movie.
Me too. I did too.
I actually don't understand why people dog it so much.
I like it too.
It's a pretty solid Hulk movie. It's fun.
I'd give Edward Norton the writing reins again for another movie.
I don't think the opening is like the perfect like TV remake.
Yes,
it's like really well done and everything. It's continuity. You can't run from it. Anyway, let's talk about this thing. I want you guys to talk about this. Act breaks.
Okay.
Elements that define an act break and how this movie fits in.
Yeah, so the reason I brought this one up, there's a YouTube channel, video, whatever you call it, the YouTube. I sound like an old man. There's this thing called YouTube.
It's like TV on the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a series I highly recommend to the screenwriters out there, and who else is going to be listening to this, right? Called Lessons from the Screenplay. And he did a breakdown of the Avengers. And it's sort of it's less a breakdown of the Avengers and more him wrestling with Save the Cat and Truby and that kind of thing. Like he's like, do these things make sense? Do they help my writing, or do they cloud things? And he broke down the Avengers using them, and then he kind of re-asked, like, well, what's the purpose, or what's the reason behind an act break? And I thought that might be an interesting question for us to kind of do for ourselves.
To unpack.
Yeah, to unpack.
Yeah.
I can tell you his is similar to the way I usually go about it, at least with the first act break. I usually say the first act break typically a character makes a choice, but not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're forced into a choice, and they go into this point of no return.
Yeah.
So they're in a new world. They kind of have to go in this direction because of a choice they made or something like that. For me, with the first act, I always test it by testing it against my log line. And I say my log lines all have a goal, a hero, a goal, an obstacle, and stakes. And if all of those things are established, generally I say it's time to move on to the next act. Because, once the hero chooses some goal to pursue and there's something in his way, it's time to move on to the next act.
Yeah.
So that's not what his answer. I'll give his answer after.
So I'm with you on a lot of it, almost verbatim. I think it's the moment, the act break is the moment, like the world, like you said, point of no return. The world will never be the same for the character again. They could never go back to the way things were before. For instance, Marty. Is Marty going to get back to the future now, right? So it's when Marty... I'm really big on... a lot of people call it central dramatic question. I like to call it central story question. CSQ is like my abbreviation for it. And for me, the end of Act 1 solidifies... For like the first set, for the whole first act, we're trying to figure out what this movie's going to be about, right? And it's coming into focus slowly. So the hook creates the hint of what this movie's going to be about, and all the events leading up to the choice at the end of Act 1 then bring that question into focus. So it's, will Marty get back to the future? And that question doesn't become definitive until the end of Act 1.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I define it.
The lessons from the screenplay guide define something similar. And again, he was experimenting. He was trying to see, and I highly recommend checking it out. But what he basically was trying to say was there are 5 acts or so many acts in the movie. And he views an act break as when the question that needs to be answered changes. So... I can't remember exactly how he did it, so please go to YouTube and see it. But maybe like the first act break is, will the Avengers come together as a team? Will they capture Loki? Now that Loki's free, can they stop Loki from doing... So every time there was like a significant change, he was defining that as an act break.
I feel like there's more than 5 then.
There are many. Those are sequences for me.
Go upwards of 10 almost.
Well, those are for me sequences,
To me, that's... It reminded me of the sequence approach.
Yeah.
And the sequence approach has 8 of them.
8 of them, yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
Can you explain the sequence approach for those of us that
and I think we did
We talked on another one, but we can talk about it again.
We should do it again.
Yeah, I mean, just in case anyone's listening.
So the sequence approach breaks down a movie by 8 sequences, 8 parts, 8 equal parts. Each one of them has kind of a governing question.
Mm-hmm. They're mini movies.
They're mini movies, 8 mini movies. So you could approach writing a screenplay by writing 8 mini movies of something. In fact, when I used to write, I think we might have talked about this in an episode before.
It's okay.
I used to come up with 8 titles for my DVD chapters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be like Dorothy in Kansas could be the first one. And it might be like, what's this movie about? Might be the question.
Tarantino almost just does it inside the movie itself.
He does.
Yeah, he does.
And you could almost see those title cards put in front of these. But it's just a way to, some people would rather write a short. So it's a way to say, hey, I might not be able to write a feature, but I can write 8 shorts.
8 shorts
come up with 8 shorts that are sequential.
Yeah.
And I think that's what his approach to me when I saw it, I'm like, this looks like the mini movie. That's kind of what he's landing on.
Yeah.
But I think you're also right in that even in the sequence approach, there can be different questions that float in and out from scene to scene, from group of scenes to scenes. It doesn't necessarily mean there isn't one central question that governs the whole body.
Yeah.
But, and I think it just depends on how you slice it. All these tools.
Well, isn't the central question of movies like this just, will the good guys win?
Or
but
isn't that kind of just the big question?
Being specific, it could be in this one, like, will they stop Loki?
Or it's usually based on So it's usually based. I would say the central story question. I mean, I didn't really spend any time on this, but just pulling it out of my ass.
That's fine.
I would say the central story. It's based around a goal, like a visual goal, right? Achieving a visual goal. And so for me, I think I would define the central story question of the Avengers is: will the Avengers manage to get the Tesseract from Loki and stop the Chitauri's from destroying the world.
Right.
Will they win?
Will they win? But it's you got to be you're being a dick.
But you can keep abstracting it to a
but you got to make it
point.
specific, and you got
The
to
more
make
specific,
it visual.
the more helpful it is for you to write the movie.
So your goal as a
But
writer
true.
should
There's
be your
truth
goal.
to what you're saying.
Yeah, there's truth.
I know. I'm just being
Devil's
a advocate there.
He's the
Right.
best devil's advocate. I would advise people to make it specific as possible.
I would.
That's a
I'm
tool.
not
Visual.
against the specificity of it. I'm just.
Because I've had people who write a script and then you take a step back from it and say, what is this story about? It's like, it's as simple as will they fight back, and I don't think that's specific enough. It's like,
And we're talking about these things in retrospect, but
There's
as
a-
tools to outline something, specificity is always better than being vague.
Yeah,
the more
yeah.
specific
You know-
you get, the better, the more it helps you.
And I don't want to get off topic too much, but we talk about a lot of these things, and then I can I go back into the lawnmower man of my brain. I'm like, and I'm thinking about all like the classic, very auteurist movies that don't have that question. And
you don't have to do it.
Right, I'm saying there's a lot of great beloved movies that don't, and you don't even know where it's going until the end.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm thinking like some Cronenbergs and stuff, like movies that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's not like, will he succeed?
Yeah.
There's not, it's not
It
there.
doesn't have to be succeed.
There is definitely a spectrum.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely a spectrum. So to
Oh,
speak.
yeah.
There's
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
the pyramid. I think I mentioned before that McGee uses.
I love the pyramid.
The arch plot is at the top,
And that's what
then-
we're talking about.
Yeah, and the mini plot is down on the bottom of the pyramid, and the anti plot is on the other side. And it can fall. Your story can fall in the middle of that. It can fall at the very top of the arch plot. Most of these Hollywood movies fall closer to the top.
Okay.
I think they're just easier. They
Easier.
realize that most audiences can digest those easier. There's not as much patience required. There's not as much input. You kind of can. You're being fed things more. I think in a good way. I'm not necessarily saying you're spoon feeding, but people can sit back and relax and be like, entertain me.
Right.
As opposed
it's very
to
digestible
Yeah.
and understandable.
It's
And
a 4-quadrant type of deal.
yeah, definitely.
It's for
But it doesn't have to
everyone.
be.
It's for mom and dad and the kids.
And there's
Right?
another one. William Martell talks about this, which I love. He's fantastic.
Bill
Bill,
Martell, known
yeah.
him for a while.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
he talks about the
Good stuff.
wrong way goal, where the character's self-destructive, and their goal is a self-destructive goal, and it's a goal we don't want them to
Like leaving
to
Las
achieve.
Vegas.
Yeah, I would say. And
Right?
it's,
I mean,
it's yeah, definitely.
You don't want him to drink himself
yeah,
to
I
death,
do.
right?
I
so
do.
that you want.
You might. I
Jamie
guess.
always wants to.
Yeah, I guess you might. But
So then the goal is, will they learn the lesson and realize like their goal is not the right thing for them?
Am I
Yeah.
remembering something, or did you say something like Whedon approached writing this in sections or sequences?
Oh, this is for later. This
Oh,
is
okay,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
final.
Oh,
the
yeah,
5
yeah.
point.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
we should start talking about
let's
that.
talk about
Let's start. I mean, like you guys said everything you need to know
Yeah,
about
about
act
the-
breaks,
no,
right?
so-
'Cause this
so,
movie's pretty heavy on act
we were
breaks.
we
though,
were
right?
talking about act. So we talked about Act 1. Did you want to talk about Act 2 and Act 3?
I'm good to the Act 3 is what I'm interested in. I mean, Act 2, I think we covered some
Yeah.
of it in some ways.
I think we
Yeah.
did. I think
Okay.
we did. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Let's talk about the finale.
Yeah, so there's a thing that Blake Snyder has, and it's not in his first book. It became a blog post that he wrote shortly after his first book, and then it ended up in his third. It is in his third
Yeah.
book, I believe. It's called the 5-point finale, or I've heard it called other things too. I think he might have called it the 5-step finale.
That
once.
originally he called
Yeah.
it something slightly different.
Yeah, he changed his verbiage. But I really like the 5-point finale as a tool. It's not so great breaking down scripts all the time,
Yeah.
though it actually works pretty well. But I like it as a tool to come up with the third act when you're writing.
Yeah.
And because the main reason is I see a lot of new writers, their finales, and we'll talk about this. So this finale is going to have at least 5 points, but a lot of times writers only have like 2 points to their finale. So it's just the predictable thing happens.
Yeah.
It's like the knight goes to kill the dragon, and he does.
Yeah.
So it
something like
answers
that.
the primary
very
question,
simple.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool to force yourself to think of the finale as a movie unto itself.
Yeah.
A 5.5 sequence movie.
Right.
Ups and downs. Yeah.
And I think with the movie like the Avengers, or we talked about Ready Player One, or a lot of these big blockbusters, they have more than 5 points in some ways. I think it's gotten to the point where they want, so that's why this doesn't work totally as a diagnostic tool. It doesn't totally work after the fact, because I think what they realize now, I always feel like the third act, and they always feel overly long to me. I get a little bored.
Like the movie's, when is it gonna end?
Yeah, but I think
it keeps ending and ending again.
I think they almost view that third act though as like, this is the last episode of the season.
Yeah.
Right.
We got to pack it big.
Right,
it can't
right.
just be a regular episode. It has to be a big episode.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like it's a television show unto itself. That's how I think of these third acts in blockbuster movies. It is, you could almost cut it off, send it to us, and it's, now you're going to watch the last episode, or maybe it's even the last two episodes. It's the two-part episode.
Yeah, two-part.
It's like a cliffhanger waiting for it. That like, here's where it picks up.
It's a cliffhanger. So I'll go over the what the 5-point finale is super quick, and then if you can help me break it down as best we can.
I'm very interested for this. So
Star Wars is one that easily breaks down in some ways. I find simpler movies like Get Out or something actually break down easier than the blockbusters because they don't stuff it full of extras.
Right.
So the 5-point finale, it's just 5 plot points that can happen in your finale. The first one's like gathering the team. A lot of the suit up kind of stuff is in this.
Yeah, suit up.
Guys putting knives in
they
their
actually
suit.
say that in Avengers.
It's a joke by Stark. So
yeah. And most of these action movies actually have this gathering of the team. Sometimes it's the plan scene, the planning scene.
Yeah,
like
make the plan.
The attack on the Death Star. Like we're going to go in here. And they're loading up the last goodbyes or whatever before they launch the attack. The second one is the storming of the castle.
Yeah.
And it's basically whatever that plan, that suit up was. Let's go storm the castle. Sometimes it literally is storming the castle.
And other times...
Ready Player One, I think, was literally
storming they have to storm a castle. She actually says, get to the castle.
Have fun storming the castle.
It's based... It is, like you said, it's based on the plan. So sometimes, if it's a siege story, it's defending the castle.
Yeah,
right. So you're still doing the gathering the team. Everybody get together because we're about to be invaded.
And in like a romantic comedy, it could just be like, I'm going to go spill my heart to her.
During a wedding.
It's very
during the wedding.
That's based on genre.
I'm going to drive to the airport.
Right. And stop them before they get on the plane.
To drive to
That's
the
the castle. Yeah.
So these things are analogous. Don't think of them too literally.
Yeah, exactly. It's based on the genre and
then the one that this is the one a lot of new writers miss. So if you're working on a finale, and the funny thing, when Blake Snyder wrote his first book, and we're not preaching Blake Snyder. I know I talk about him a lot.
It's easy to understand. It's easy to teach with.
When he wrote his first book, he just had finale as the last 25 pages.
The end.
He just said, this is the part that ends the story in a cathartic way.
That was always my big problem with and he fixes it when he comes out with this. This is in the third book. Yeah, because he goes beat by beat, like every 10 pages has a new beat. And it's like, the last 30 minutes of your movie is just a beat called the finale.
The finale. So the Hightower surprise...
That's really weird.
Yeah,
the Hightower surprise is the one people are missing. But it really says, there almost has to be like this midpoint to your finale. There's some false defeat almost. Or
it's a false defeat is a good
It's
good
often
way to
a false
conceptualize
defeat. You often see like they get there and then, there's this rug pull. Like it's not going to be as easy.
The villain gets the upper hand again.
The villain gets the upper hand
I can see where you're going with this exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And then after that, it's surprising how many movies have it almost beat for beat.
I'm seeing all of it in the Avengers like so hard. Just
without ever reading it or anything. It's just intuitive. All this stuff's intuitive. So the next part is dig down deep. And dig down deep, the way I instruct this, and it's not always this way, but I think that dig down deep is the thing. It's them deciding to do something that they couldn't have done at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
So it charts. This is kind of the ultimate culmination of the character. And if you follow along with these things,
it's the true moment of growth.
It's the true moment.
It's use the force.
If you follow along with these things, you'll have a character arc. The problem is people don't follow these and they kind of stuff a character arc, and then it's just
checking a box.
Yeah, and it doesn't even play into the end.
He needs to change here. She needs to change here.
The character's like, I have changed.
I see it all the time, man.
Oh man, that's all amazing.
If you do a Hightower surprise, and
since when I go,
it'll
Right.
it'll insist that your character arc is part of the overall story. It'll make your character arc essential if you do it right.
Like it doesn't work without it.
It doesn't work without it. So that's the dig down deep part. And then there's executing the new plan. So they come up with the new plan
based on now that the villains have taken the upper hand and they've realized if I dig down deep, I can take the upper hand from the villains again.
Do you know what movie might be a better example?
There's tons.
There's probably tons, but it's making me think of Predator.
Predator's a great example.
Yeah. The whole like every point in there is pretty much covered in Predator.
Star Wars is like hands down. I mean,
that's true. I don't know. It just made me think of Predator. The whole thing.
There's the weird thing I always have with Star Wars, and that's the one they use for it before we launch into the Avengers.
The Avengers one.
The Star Wars one, the Hightower surprise, isn't that big of a surprise to me. Like that's the only one I get.
Vader comes in.
When I give that as an example,
Right.
the surprise it isn't like. Surprise! We have a force field.
Yeah,
it's more just like it's not as easy as we thought.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of more difficult.
Yeah,
but it's easy to track.
It's easy to track because then they use the force as the dig down deep. He blows it up. It obviously has the planing scenes. So Star Wars tracks easy. The surprise isn't a huge surprise.
No, agreed.
It's just like this is. But I also think that says something about the Hightower surprise. It doesn't always have to be a big clever surprise. It can just be like, yeah, that's not going to work. You know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We got to do something else. So the Avengers, again, help me with this. So the gathering of the team.
It's definitely when he says suit up.
It's right on screen, literally happening. There's not.
And it's what and they all convene in New York, and then Cap is telling them, okay, you do this and you do that, and
the shot from the trailer.
Yeah, that's that's not.
Oh, that's not. What
that's
we're talking
later.
About.
Yeah. And then Thor goes and deals with Loki, and Iron Man takes the skies. They all here's what we're gonna do, because the shot you're talking about doesn't come until near the end of the fight.
Right.
Okay.
And then the storming the castle is like the Chitauri is coming down. The battle's raging in the middle of the city.
Probably when the first eel comes out of that thing.
Yeah.
Probably the actual when they're like, okay, now it's a thing we have to put our whole body in here.
Right, and everybody's fighting the Chitauri. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the storming the castle. It's kind of like defending the castle, really. Yeah. It's a siege on the city, so yeah.
Like Rio
they're
Bravo.
really easy and interchangeable defending or storming.
I read something.
Really just means the plan. Or whatever,
I read somebody that compared this to Rio Bravo. I was like, that's a weird comparison.
I'm not familiar with Rio Bravo.
Maybe for you, a better comparison would be Assault on Precinct 13.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
A really weird comparison, but New York City as the station, and then
I like that.
Yeah.
So
the others are attacking.
The one thing we didn't get to go in. I mean, we're kind of flowing here.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Let's just keep going, and then I'll say some stuff about the last act.
Okay, we'll talk about Rio Bravo.
Yeah.
Rio Bravo. You don't like Rio Bravo?
The Hightower surprise is when the Security Council is like, no, F this, we're just going to send a missile in there.
Nuke it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that it's kind of a stake raiser, much like a midpoint
big time.
Would be.
It's
personal stakes. It just got personal. It even has a ticking clock, just like a midpoint would have.
Yeah.
So the dig down deep is actually Tony.
It's Tony deciding, okay, I'm going to sacrifice.
Is this Whedon giving the movie pretty much to Stark at this point?
I think so.
Honestly, a lot of times, if you want to see who your protagonist is or your most important character, this dig down deep is really
will
the place
define
where you
it.
look.
Yeah,
because all the rest of them kind of just stare while it's happening, and that's all they do.
Yeah, it gives. I would agree that it defines Tony as the lead.
Yeah.
Which is probably no surprising thinking about that era of.
And his movie made
Marvel.
this all happen.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Iron Man's responsible.
Totally appropriate and fitting.
Yeah.
So the dig down deep is Tony deciding I'm going to sacrifice myself for the greater good and get rid of this missile.
Which is great because it's in contrast with his character.
Oh, it's perfect.
An arrogant,
selfish, greedy guy. Goes selfless.
I can see your wheels turning about this 5-point finale. I can see it.
Well, yeah, because I don't think I haven't really ever read the first Blake Snyder book. I never read the sequel.
This isn't the third one. The third one's just as good.
I'm not familiar with this, so it's nice to know.
The second one's all diagnostic.
You're in the third one?
I'm in the third one.
Jamie!
He mentions you?
Absolutely. I get a whole page.
That's awesome.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's why I keep plugging it unless I actually get some money. No, I didn't. I don't get any money. I was just a friend.
So then,
Was it something you wrote or you?
Me, it's a long story that I'll briefly synopsize right here. But I knew him before he wrote the books. I actually wrote a script with him before he wrote Save the Cat.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
You were doing a script podcast. You probably should mention this stuff.
I guess. So yeah, I knew him. He was a friend of mine before he wrote Save the Cat. He would try out his Save the Cat stuff on me while I didn't know he was writing a book. So he'd use all this jargon,
Right.
and I just assumed it was the jargon of weird LA types. So anyway, that's my quick aside.
So now the executing of the new plan is when Iron Man, sends the bomb through, and then he falls to Earth, and then they regroup together as a team. Now, when Tony wakes up, and you get that shot. Oh no, actually,
No, that's not how
that's
that
before
happens.
that. My bad. But it is the Iron Man sending the bomb into the portal, and then the Avengers capturing Loki. So yeah,
So capturing Loki.
Capturing Loki is the executing of the new plan. Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
just
just
basically
go and
going
get
to get him
yeah,
after
yeah.
the Hawk already beat him
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so that's a 5-point finale, and I find it very useful for new writers just to force themselves to have something beyond. We go and we grab Loki. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
that's what happens.
Well,
with
because
new
a
writers.
lot. So yeah, you come into a lot of stories where the Act 3 is let's get ready to get Loki, and then okay, we got Loki.
Yeah, and
that's-
it's like they end up being like 10 pages long.
Yeah.
Right.
And
a lot.
A lot.
I see that so
it's
often.
Very, very common.
Oh my
It's a
gosh!
very
Yeah,
common
I
thing.
see a 90-page script and 80 pages of it is Act 1 and 2.
So I find
It's seriously.
while this
And then it ends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so while this sounds intuitive, forcing yourself through this exercise, if you're writing a script to break all these things, I think it can be very useful just to protect
I
yourself.
agree.
Yep.
I agree.
So just to clarify everything, you guys are saying that the Avengers is an excellent example of 5-point finale.
yeah.
I think
And
so.
Yeah.
just to solidify that statement, when he was hired to do this,
Mhm.
they had 2 years. They already had like a deadline when they hired him. They had 2 years to get this movie made, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't have a script, and they were like, we need to start working on the effects for the climax.
Right.
So he had to write this climax first so that effects people could be working on it 2 years before they even had it ready. And so he said he wrote this in 5 acts, the finale itself. And he told him, if I'm going to be allowed to do Avengers, the only way I'm going to do an Avengers movie is I don't want to make it a superhero movie. I want it to be a war movie. And he said this was kind of like his declaration. He was like, I'm going to write a 5-act war finale, and if they don't like it, then like I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
So yeah, so this was designed as 5 parts, just like the 5-point finale.
Do you think he was conscious of that?
I would doubt if he
I
knew what
doubt
the 5-point
he's-
finale
I don't
is.
think he needs stuff like this,
Yeah.
man.
Okay.
It is intuitive.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
very
why
intuitive.
I think it's
yeah.
more a tool if you're stuck or if you're new or
I
something
just think
like
it fits right in, like you said, because it's very
that. Well,
intuitive.
I think it shows that people are doing, they're not just grabbing Loki. He's thinking in bigger, very experienced, top of his game guy is doing it in a way very similar to this tool. This tool will help you get there.
Just like all good tools, I think what you find is people will put a name to something that you're doing.
Right.
So you go,
You're doing it right, and they're like, "Well, you're doing
they're
that."
Like
Okay.
that's
Exactly.
what that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
this
yeah.
is
what
called.
all
And
this stuff
often
is.
the tools, they go, here's how you could do it in a different way than that you haven't been doing it before. And you go, I never thought of that. I am gonna
Try
try
6
that.
points.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think to your point, like a movie like Predator, I totally bet it nails it.
I bet so. And that was way before any of this was written.
some
on
of the
paper.
movies-
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Some of the movies today, they overdo the
Oh.
finale, or maybe not. I mean, to your taste, maybe you think it's great, but they tend to do more and more surprises.
Oh, there's 10 high tower surprises.
There
Yeah.
might even be more and more pieces to the character arc decisions and dilemmas and stuff like that. Whether or not that's a good thing, I think you at least need to have these 5
The
beats.
5.
That's my take.
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
it depends on tone.
It depends on your tone. Yeah.
I think a good movie to point to would be probably Kingsman. I think it has a couple. I think it has a few more of those high tower ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
than-
okay.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's what I love about that movie.
Yeah.
I think it would be wrong to like look at this and say, "Oh, you have 3 high tower surprises." That is wrong. But I think I think the value of it is, I think the value of it is have at least these 5 things, and you'll be in good shape.
How to ensure that your last act is dramatic.
But I want to play devil's advocate and say, unless it's not there, don't force it.
Well, I mean,
if it's not there, if you got your 10-minute,
can you think of a movie
if
that
it feels right? It is right.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
That's actually an editing term or editing saying is if it feels right, it is right. So
I can't think of any now, but I'm sure there's some movie that ends abruptly
immediately,
and you're just like, what? And you liked it still,
yeah.
You know? But it was like that's the end.
For it's doing something different.
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but. You know, so not that this did this, but like No Country for Old Men. It was just like we're about to get
people
the scene.
Hated that ending, though.
Boom.
Yeah,
it's like what, you know, that's a different type of movie. But anyway, I'm sure there's
often times where you want movies to just be like, and it's over, and then the song starts, you know, and the credits roll.
I would say though that most of the mistakes you and I are talking about are not people that intend to do something avant-garde or
not
different.
At all.
No.
They think they're doing this, and they're just kind of missing
it. It's very
what
thin.
Am I missing?
It's thin.
Yeah.
It's thin. Yeah. Kind of underdeveloped and yeah.
5-point finale.
5-point
It'll
finale.
help.
That's a good. No, it's a good. It's I think like you said, intuitively, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
But
you've seen it a million times.
To me, it's not so much. I would have guessed what a 5-point finale was wrong as the term before you just described it. I would have guessed it was the wrapping up of 5 different small storylines.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is different than what you just said. You know what I mean? That's what I would have assumed. Yeah. But now that you said
and this doesn't talk about the denouement either, which is another one last little thing.
That's a whole nother thing.
The applause. Yeah, everyone takes a bow to the audience. Most
what was
traditional.
What do you think that was in the Avengers?
That's where they're all back. They have one little moment together where they show them. They show Banner and Tony Stark getting into the fancy car and driving away together. They're all kind of like,
and where Thor and Loki teleport away.
Yeah, that's the moment where the people who are in the play stand up at the stage and take a bow, and we go.
Blake Snyder does have a closing image, which kind of encapsulates that to an extent.
Yeah.
Maybe not, depending. And I think we should add one post credits.
Post credits for this one.
The shawarma eating.
Yeah.
Kind of really want some shawarma now.
Yeah.
Well. All right. I think that's everything we got on our list.
Yeah.
For the Avengers 1.
Yeah.
We're going to see the new Avengers right now.
Coming.
We're all.
I wish. I would.
Couple weeks.
There's no screenings in Baltimore.
How about that?
But our podcast doesn't get to see it early. I thought that was one of the perks.
I mean, there's literally no screenings for anyone. So
Russo brothers, if you're listening to this, and I know
really
you are,
love one.
Just send us a link.
We've got Jamie Nash from Blake Snyder's 3rd book.
Yeah,
that's right. Turn to page 87. There's a whole page describing why you should send me the link.
Just message him on Instagram. He checks it often. What a weird joke. All right. That's everything, guys. Avengers, I'm excited for the new one.
Me too.
I'm glad we did this, though.
Yeah.
I think it actually kind of jazzed me up for the new one.
It made me excited for this.
Kind of reinvigorated me. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye. You have just listened to Writer's Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring 2 professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.